Boom! Welcome to this is the Anointed Life Mentorcast, the show where you will learn how to revamp your mindsets to the power of the name Yahweh Elohim-Yeshua. Tune in for our weekly episodes and transform your life from living as mere human to thinking like Elohim. We will give you the basic components of the self-existent and eternal mindset, a powerful mindset, and authoritative mindset for more peace, more happiness, and more spiritual mastery. I am your host, Lady Keturah, also known as Keturah Bartholomew, life coach in the name, and co-hosting with me is, as per usual, the amazing and wonderful.
Zealand food, you guys know what that is.
And we are hailing you from Trinidad and Tobago, the beautiful twin islands from which eventually we'll be having, or very soon, as a matter of fact, we'll be having events in person in the Caribbean. So we encourage you to stay tuned for those. The events will be posted. We already have a few planned out and ready to go. So, jumping across to today's episode, we are going to have a look at, do I need to sacrifice the things I love to live through the priesthood? Now, this is actually a part two to, um, of course, in this particular podcast, we address issues pertaining to mindset and so on. Priesthood is all part of it. And so in part one, we actually did that, I think it's about a couple weeks ago. This is part two now. Now, in part one, we talked about the mere fact that you need to sacrifice something means that your heart is not with it.
Hmm.
I remember Zane explained that we don't sacrifice to eat. We don't actually, like, when you're in your job place. I think that was the example you used, if I'm not mistaken. When you're on the job place, you don't say, I need to sacrifice my time to eat. No, you actually make it your business to eat or to have a drink of water, or your favorite juice, or whatever it may be. And so a lot of people, because of the misuse of the word sacrifice, may unknowingly be saying that walking in Christ is a sacrifice. And now, the mere fact that you have to say walking in Christ is a sacrifice means that you really in your heart don't want to do this. And so you're actually saying, my heart is elsewhere, but I'm going to do this either for reasons like it's a moral compass or you figure it's the right thing to do. And so, in our previous episode, in part one, we encourage you to reconsider that perspective. And Zane shared something with me the other day that really stuck with me. One does not, or should not rather, want, and I'm not quoting him exactly like verbatim, but one should not choose to walk in Christ or to actually be part of a covenant that your heart is not in. Because eventually, you're going to reach the place where you're going to be finding yourself doing things contrary to the covenant because your heart wasn't there in the first place. It's not something that you want to do. And I found that very impacting because if we take the same approach that we have been taught, like probably many of us have been exposed in religion or whatever forms of Christianity there is out there. And there are doctrines that have been taught that this should be approached through like legalism. So we think that we need to put away this and we need to put away that. And like I know in the system I was raised in, we were told, like, things like no we can go to the cinema, for example. And so I didn't see a cinema till I was in my 20s, I believe, my early 20s. And these are the things that we are told you need to put away to show your love for God. Now, Zin, I think you also expressed at one point in time that you were familiar with a system similar to what I was raised in, not exactly the same, but that has a type of legalism. Is that not so, right?
Yeah, I was predominantly Pentecostal when I came up as a child. I went to Catholic primary school. It was
Mm-hmm.
predominantly Pentecostal. I had contact with many different religions from what we know as spiritual Baptist in the Caribbean to Seventh Day Adventist, Methodist, Anglican, Catholic, Jehovah's Witness. I had contact with these different religions, and in my household, it was predominantly Pentecostal and a very, I guess, fundamental type of Pentecostalism where we, at some point in time, even kept the Sabbath
Mm-hmm.
and was seen, and it was actually something that we did. We were very prayerful And so we had a lot of spiritual experiences, and but our belief system was that we keep the Sabbath, and on the Saturday we must do what we must keep the Sabbath so that we could get the blessing of the Sabbath,
Right.
right? And you fast and pray on the Sabbath day and things like that. So yeah,
So you're familiar with the whole idea. I mean, I don't know if you were taught it in the same manner I was, where you need to sacrifice. Like, I couldn't see a club, I couldn't dance. Things like when Latin dancing, the classes was forbidden. Um, there were a lot of things that we told we need to sacrifice to show that we are like disciples of God. They didn't use the word exact disciples. I can't even remember the terminology. But
well,
basically, we were told that we need to put away what we want the most.
in
If
my
that
ho-
makes sense.
in my household, we weren't taught that.
Okay.
We were actually taught either this is spiritual or secular, or this is godly or ungodly.
Right. I
So,
remember that terminology now.
so it wasn't anything about you need to sacrifice this. No, it was either godly or ungodly. Your your desire to do it was not was not given priority over whether it was godly or ungodly or not.
Okay. Gotcha.
Right? No, from that perspective, decisions were made as a family unit that to actually identify what was godly, what was ungodly, what we will do and what we will not do in the context of whether or not this is something that we are living from as a lifestyle.
Uh huh.
Right? And yeah, that's basically what it was. And the, I mean I also went to a church here in the central area of Trinidad and Tobago, where they were actually, this is a church that call themselves, or a community that call themselves Branhamites,
Yeah.
right? They actually, the Branhamites particularly, they Branhamites, they are followers of William Marion Branham, and they were very, very much along the lines, or they were a lot. They were working with a lot more prohibitions.
Mm-hmm.
So that meant no makeup for women. They couldn't cut their hair. They had to wear long dresses. It's a whole long list of rules. They couldn't have a television in their home.
Oh my.
A lot of different prohibitions that they were working with. And in some context, you can say that this they also actually may have been, they were told it was actually godly or ungodly. Whether they
Mhm.
liked it or not wasn't given priority over what was godly or ungodly. But you could pretty much say that these people were sacrificing all of these things that they would have liked to do,
Right.
but they were told that that is not God's way.
Yeah.
All right. So, but
That
this
I'm
is
also familiar with that.
right, but this is not the context of what the Bible refers to with regards to this concept, though, right? Because this is actually applied to things that people do, like watching television, going to a cinema, having a beer, drinking wine, watching a particular movie, keeping particular days, eating certain foods. These are things that people apply it to, but this has nothing to do with the Bible. These are, as a matter of fact, especially through the lens of the ancient Hebrews, this is not a consideration. These were there were things in particular that were mentioned in the Old Covenant that was stated that they should not do, but because of the lack of understanding of the actual covenant, Westernized Christianity surmised that these things were rules, right? And in surmising that these things were rules, because when they, in our Westernized Christian community, in our Greco-Roman way of thinking, we have had the tendency to apply what we understand a concept to be to what those words mean in the Bible. And so one of the biggest errors that has actually taken foot in the Greco-Roman way of thinking in this civilization, that is influenced by the Greco-Roman way of thinking, is assuming that the law of Moses, the word law, is equivalent to what we understand laws to be in our civilization, which would be basically come down to legislations and regulations. Right? This is not the context of the Torah. And because we impose that perspective onto onto the text, we begin to treat it like a rule keeping system, that these are things that they shouldn't be, that should and shouldn't do, or should and should not participate in, to validate yourself before God. But that is not the context of the text. The Torah in particular was a book. It's called the Book of the Torah of Yahweh, which translate the books of the precepts of Yahweh. And if you're familiar with the covenant, and these are things that should be taught in modern Christianity, because many people are actually holding themselves to some things based and actually in their hearts really believe that what they're doing, just like how we were in our hearts, we believe that this was what you were supposed to do, and you end up in a form of mental imprisonment. The Torah in particular was not meant to be used like legislations. If you speak to any Torah keeping Jew today, they will never tell you that that is legislations. They don't even know what you're talking about. Right? They don't even have an idea as to what you are referring to. And that's because the covenant in particular was a covenant where Israel went on under the guidance of Moses, and using Moses as a template, Israel was actually led into a covenant with God where they were supposed to take on God's name as their own. And they had rituals to go through that. I'm not going to get into all of that. And the Torah was actually like a user's manual as to how to work out the character of that particular name. It was never legislations that came with this kind of perspective that we have in our westernized culture, where there is punishment. It was used as guidance, instruction, learning. So whereas we were taught to think in our culture that you break these commandments and you face punishment, in the actual context of the text, God, if you fall off of the guidance that you're being given, you're actually just pretty much told to, hey, you don't do it that way, you do it like this. See, it's a manual to be able to function, not the legislations that we made it out to be. Now, because we have had that perspective, we have used activities, keeping days, and general daily life rules, right? Rule keeping systems of do's and don'ts to pretty much validate ourselves, or to pretty much present ourselves before God as righteous. But nowhere in the scriptures is that perspective validated. From the perspective of the Torah, you took on God's name, and the Torah actually guided you with the things that you should and should not do, or the things that particular character would and wouldn't do. Which means that it's pretty much the principles or that particular character. The Torah was used as the mindset or the perspective of that character. And from there, from integrity to that particular name and character, you avoided certain things because it was breaking the integrity of that character. In the New Testament, it is also somewhat different. In the New Testament, now what we have in the New Testament is the same. And we see that in Gospels, in the Gospels also, where we see Jesus interfacing with, for example, the rich man. And he tells him to give up everything that he owns. The context of sacrificing the things that you love It's not specific to things of your daily routine and not going here and not going there. It actually means to serve. It actually means to cut off or to give up the priority that is not the priority of the name or the priority of the spirit. Now, naturally, whatever priority that you have in life will technically validate what you do and don't do. But here's the thing about that. This is very different from saying don't go to cinema or don't have a beer, don't drink wine, or don't have a television in your home, you can't cut your hair, you should only wear long clothes. These are rules that pretty much are indicating, when we treat it like that, we are indicating that these things are ungodly and therefore it is not, it is outside of God's presence and outside of God's will for you. And if you're saying that, what you're also saying is that these things are not created by God. Yet the Bible says that all things were made by him, and without him was anything made that was made. In the context of the scriptures, you are supposed to sacrifice not things like what ice cream you wear and what food you will eat, and all of these lists that we use. The context of the scriptures is sacrificing priorities that are external and not the priority of the name of God given to you, not the priority of the
Right.
Spirit of God in you.
So then,
Now, naturally, once the difference here is that once you sacrifice that priority, because you may have very much like, for example, if you were using societal social status and fame and money as your priority in life, you may have liked that. But then to come into the covenant means that you need to cut it off. Now, most of the times, not most of the times, 100% of the times, if you are faced with the covenant, cutting those things off are not seen as sacrifices. Because sacrifices means that you don't want to do it, but you're doing it by some other rule or some other necessity, whilst your heart still desires it. When the gospel was preached and signs and wonders were demonstrated, that naturally changed the person's heart and caused them to think about wanting something greater. So they willingly walked away from their life's priorities and made the name of God their priority, because it healed them, it provided for them, it gave them mental health, good mental health, it freed them of devils, it brought heaven to them. And so these persons would willingly move from using those things as reference points, as priorities in life, and make God's name the priority, God's spirit the priority, so that they can experience heaven and earth. So it was not seen as something like a sacrifice. It was seen as the most logical action to take based on the truth that you are confronted with. In our culture, we don't preach the gospel with signs and wonders. We preach the gospel with discussions, with oratory, with convincing arguments. And so with a convincing argument, it leaves the person in the position of not being able to invalidate why their priority is not beneficial or not advantageous to them anymore. So the whole idea of sacrificing these things for God is a purely westernized concept, and a concept that is based on a framework of preaching the gospel that does not exist in the Bible, nor are the apostles or the Messiah familiar with what you're talking about. And the last thing here is, you see Jesus' conversation with the rich man. This is somebody who grew up in that covenant, but made his priority money. And Israel was actually in that rhythm, in that rhythm of deviation or indifference from the covenant for some time. So up comes Yeshua, and he's doing all of these things, and therefore he's seeing Yeshua doing it, and what he sees Yeshua is doing is actually calling him to responsibility. And in that context, you see there is a limbo between whether he should actually follow this rabbi or give up his priority, which is his wealth, having money. But that is actually because these people are in covenant already. In our culture, this is something that is not like that. You preach the gospel with signs and wonders. If you heal somebody, you prophesy, you show them that God knows them, you set them free from devils, you resurrect the dead. Who isn't going to be confronted with the fact that their life priority is weak in comparison to the priority of this person doing this, and they want to experience this and live in this for the rest of their lives?
So basically, where it's like the law of inspiration goes there, where you inspire the person by the signs and the wonders, and then they realize there's a better life or a better way of doing things, or actually
Exactly.
a more functional
Exactly.
way. And that makes them now desire that rather than trying to convince them with, as you were saying a while ago, all this sweet oratory about how much God loves them and all of these things, and let them experience the love. That
Eh,
makes them realize, oh, okay, so what I'm doing, I need to consider this. And this is where like a heart decision comes in, and they don't see it as a sacrifice because now their heart is willing to go
is
in another direction.
the verbiage that you use there is most accurate because the Yeshua, the apostles, they understood that Yeshua was rebreathed into humanity, and therefore Yeshua is Yahweh Elohim in flesh, and therefore the Father's name is Yeshua's name, and therefore Yeshua in you is the Father's name in you too. They would have known that the name Yahweh Elohim means that everybody is self-existent and therefore self-determining. And that means that you have to inspire. If you're dealing with self-determining entities, the you work with the law of inspiration, which is why you perform signs and wonders to inspire them out of their logic and out of their wisdom, out of their priorities. It inspires them to realize that this here is greater than anything that I have ever seen in my life. But in our westernized culture, we do not work with inspiration and signs and wonders. We work with arguments. We work with well structured oratory and well structured arguments. And basically, what you're doing now in this context is literally disrespecting the energetic nature of of the person's spirit. Because if you're using an argument, what you're basically trying to do is either one, demand of that person that they leave their logic and make your logic theirs, or two, you are invalidating them to manipulate them to gain authority over their spirit so that they can bow to you and to bow to your well-structured argument that Jesus is Lord. In neither case are you actually inspiring that person to leave their priority. So to come to Christ will be seen as a sacrifice. Because signs and wonders is what invalidates somebody's their priority in life, invalidates that which is most important to them, because they see something that that their logic and all of their logic and all of their life cannot explain, and they want to live in that.
Well, that makes so much sense. So, while saying this, actually, this is where we have to bring this episode to a close.
Mm.
Um, we encourage those and shout out to those who are joining us live. We encourage you to share with us your takeaways via the comment section. Is this something that you knew before? Because a lot of people have been taught, unfortunately, that you need to sacrifice for God and for a godly life. And unfortunately, these are things that we even pass on to kids of this upcoming generation. And so it may even be incorporated in your parenting where you're thinking that you're doing the right thing by telling them that you need to sacrifice the game to do this, or even if it was is with good intention, it may be very destructive because you're basically trying to get the person to live contrary to their heart.
Yeah.
And as Zane rightfully shared, this is not covenantal. So we encourage you to share with us your takeaways. To support episodes such as these, we encourage you to come across the Patreon, www.patreon.com/Zane underscore EL underscore Fuego. There you can become a Shining Star Patreon and benefit from more episodes such as these. And of course, your wonderful and heartfelt support continues to help us to take the gospel of Christ and educate the saints, teach those who are eager to walk in the name, to manifest power, to go out to lay hands and heal the sick, raise the dead, prophesy, function on the gifts, and the whole works. So this brings us to the end of today's episode. Zin, do you have anything to share in finality? Finality?
Maybe just one thought
Uh huh.
that um if we for those who are actually listening to this or will be listening to this, and even for Patreon members community, if you're preaching the gospel requires that you inspire persons. And we have gone through hundreds of episodes to actually demonstrate in the Bible on in our Patreon community how the gospel, the only way to preach the gospel is through signs and wonders. The act of healing is preaching the gospel. The act of casting out devils from someone is preaching the gospel. The act um, of raising the dead is preaching the gospel. The act of making revealing the provision of God is preaching the gospel. There is nowhere in the Bible where it actually indicates that you preach the gospel by an argument or well structured presentation, verbal presentation. Preaching the gospel is revealing the name. And the name in the Bible, Yahweh Elohim, is not a name that speaks. It is a name that makes itself well, its presence known by miraculous by miraculous events, by signs and wonders and miracles. This is all through the Bible, not only the New Testament, it is all through the Bible. So if you're representing the name, then signs, wonders, miracles, this is the route that you go. If you're using verbal presentations and arguments to actually quote unquote preach the gospel, you are not representing the name. You are representing something else, but it is not God. Just want to say that, right? Put that out there.
Food for thought.
Food for thought.
All right. So thank you again for those who have taken the time to join us tonight. Thank you, precious sister, for posting the link there for us. And so, yes, we encourage you, of course, to share with us your take away, as per usual. This is the Anointed Life Mentor Cast, the show where you will learn, as a matter of fact, how to revamp your mindset to the power of the name Yahweh Elohim-Yeshua. We encourage you to tune in for weekly episodes and transform your life from living as mere human to thinking like Elohim. Today, for example, we gave you the basic components of self-existent thinking and eternal mindset, a powerful mindset. Today, you would have learned that sacrifice is not self-existent in this context, of course. An authoritative mindset for more peace, more happiness, and more spiritual mastery. Blessings and much love, everyone.